Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Data-Driven Mindset. We have three experts lined up today to share their experience and advice on how communicators and marketeers can be more data-driven. Why is this important? Well, that's something that we will explore in a moment. My name is Christopher Van Mosselfelder, and I'm the Global Content Marketing Manager at Mynewsdesk. I'll be chairing today's discussion, which is brought to you by Mention, the leading social media monitoring tool. And we have our dear friend Sandra from Mention online to deal with any immediate questions or comments during the webinar. So please feel free to chat with her. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. My name is Jonathan Milne. I lead the marketing team here at Klipfolio. We are a data analytics platform for small and mid-sized market companies. We have 11,000 customers globally in about 80 countries, and we're here to help people make better data-driven decisions. So I'm really glad to be here on this topic. So thanks.
Hey guys, just go ahead. I'm Julian here. I'm Julian Gottke from Quintly, leading the marketing team at Quintly. And we are a social media analytics tool, basically doing what Google Analytics does for the social media world.
Hi everyone, I'm Eugene from SEMRush. So SEMRush is a global leader in online visibility management, and we help people optimize their online performance in various channels. Historically, you may know us for products in search engine marketing, but we now have all types of software for online visibility management. And as a chief strategy officer, I run a lot of analytics frameworks to ensure that we have proper data-driven culture.
Well, thank you very much for that round of introductions, everyone. So let's dig in. Why is it important to build a data-driven culture, and how can you ensure your business outpaces the competition? So over the last 20 years, we've seen a huge shift in how businesses compete. 2 decades ago, access to capital was a critical difference. Then with the advent of the digital transformation, access to talent became increasingly important as the new environment required hard to find skills and which were in high demand. Now, the driving force behind the most innovative companies isn't access to talent or capital, it's a mindset, because innovative companies depend on distributed decision-making, agile workflows, and fast-paced experimentation to win. What's more, the digital revolution has born mountains of data, but companies must possess the right combination of skills, technology, and culture to unlock value from it. Because at the core of the agile mindset is data, of course, and the insights you get from data. So I'll ask our guest speakers today, what do you think are the major challenges that companies are facing today, and why? Jonathan, would you like to start with that question?
Sure. I think every business has a challenge, obviously, whether or not, if you're early stage, it might be product market fit. If you're later stage, is how to scale efficiently. But I'm sure everyone here is probably interested in this topic because everyone has a challenge around data. One of my favorite quotes is around how many tools the average marketer uses today. The average marketer uses 12 to 14 different tools in a daily job. So if you just think about those 12 to 14 tools and how much data they're creating to try to get insights to make a better decision is not easy, right? And so the challenge now is, what data should I trust? Where should my data come from? How do I make good decisions off that data? So yeah, the exponential growth of data is actually causing an exponential growth in how to make decisions off data, a bigger problem. So
very interesting. Eugene, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I think from my point of view, the biggest challenges come from the solutions that solve previous problems that outlined here. So for example, because problem with access to capital was solved, now it's easier than ever to start new business, because now we have all the collaboration tools. It's easier to work with very talented people worldwide, so you don't necessarily have a problem with access to talent. And because of this, more companies than ever getting born, and level of competition increases dramatically. So from this point of view, you need to have a mindset of A, knowing your surroundings and collecting proper data about what's going on around, and B, making right decisions to navigate through those, competitive landscapes. And specifically, I think it's very important in this kind of environment to filter signal from noise. So you react on signals and just ignore the noise, and that's probably a very hard thing to do.
So monitoring your surroundings and collecting data are key. Julian at Quintly, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I would say it goes in a bit in the direction what Jonathan said. I think deciding on the right data is the most critical part for me. Asking the right questions, and then based on these questions, go into data and look for the answers. Don't just do data because everybody needs to get data driven nowadays, but ask questions, and then based on that, think, sit back, talk to people, and talk to your coworkers. And then decide on, okay, which data actually can we make use of now to answer this question? I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, very true. It's all about asking the right type of questions in order to get the data that you need.
Yeah, for sure.
So Mention in Mynewsdesk set out to understand how do innovative organizations adopt this mindset. Is it about technology, processes? Is it about access to data? And what are the roadblocks? So we surveyed 1,050 PR professionals, marketeers, and business owners to find out more about the issue. And what did we find? So we asked ourselves the question, how data-driven are organizations today? And it really sort of depends if you're a half glass full or half glass empty person. Because our research showed that just 1 in 5 teams have a consistent approach to data-driven decision-making. Gentlemen, does this result surprise you? And why do you think the majority of organizations sort of fail to work consistently in making data-driven decisions? Jonathan at Klipfolio, would you like to take the lead on this question?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually surprised that this number is not even smaller, meaning that if you think of the word teams, how many teams are in an organization, and the word consistent, even if you look at how data is used by every team within your organization to make a decision, the types of data, the experience, the need for it is very different. So in the finance world, they've needed data every month to close out their books. But the need for a marketer now to do a monthly reporting on ad spend, that is fairly new. In the past, we never tracked it as much as we do today, or in social media, as Julian would talk about. So it absolutely makes sense to me that we don't see it being consistent, and there's learning curves for each team to learn how to adopt it.
For sure.
Eugene?
Yeah, just a couple things to add. And in general, pretty much agree with what Jonathan said. I think you never get 100%. So not maybe 1 out of 5 is not big enough, right? And we should aim for bigger, but you never get 100%. There are just fundamental limitations on types of decisions that can be made using data. Sometimes, if you want to make truly data-driven decision, you just have to learn too long. Sorry, and sometimes it's just better to make a decision with your gut feeling faster than wait until you have like really representative sample, because competition might be miles away by the time you have the data. So 1 out of 5 might be low, but you never get 5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's difficult to reach 100%. Totally got you there. Julian at Quintly, do you have anything to add?
Not really. It doesn't surprise me as well. I just see why, right? It can be frightening. I think it is frightening, or it can be frightening on a daily level, on a daily basis. You need perhaps a new talent in the team. So it can be, let's say, frightening in the beginning to start with data. But I think we, for example, grew like organically into it. And I think if you do it organically and don't like pressure yourself, just getting data-driven 5 out of 5 today, I think then it's not that frightening actually. So I think it's just about the mindset we are talking today.
Mm-hmm. True. So now we're going to walk you through the most interesting findings and then talk about some of the practical steps that you can take. But we encourage you to download the entire report to see even more detail. So please visit bit.ly/data-driven19 to download a free copy of the Data-Driven Mindset. So we asked respondents, what types of research do you or your team conduct to inform your communications and/or marketing strategy? The results here show you the results by job role. So whether you work as a public relations professional, marketing professional, or business owner leader. Eugene, at SEMRush, website analytics, not surprisingly, is the most adopted type of research out there. How do you see your customers using SEMRush to inform their communication and marketing strategy?
Oh, thanks. Super good question. So as you said, web analytics, one of the easiest thing and first things that people implement. There are fundamental limitations of what you can learn by using only your own first-party data. And what we allow people to do is technically we kind of almost like we give them access to the analytics data of their competitors, so they can learn how they get traffic, from what sources, from what keywords, what marketing activities are they running, and you can kind of reverse engineer it and see what's working, what's not working. So technically, that's how we help companies. But I think looking at this slide in general, conclusion I'm making, it's great that people using their first-party data. That's where you start. But what I like even more here is that people using all kinds of data, which I think is much more important than relying on one source.
Mm-hmm. Very true. So it's important to use many sources of data. And Julian and Quintly, if we look at social media research in particular, that's also widely used. How should one go about using it effectively, and what are the benefits?
Yeah, I think it's widely used. First of all, that's great. But social media research is a super wide field, I would say, right? So it again really depends on what you're looking for and what is relevant for you. Like basically, are you looking, or are you working as an agency or with a brand together with influencers? So are you researching influencers, influencer marketing, or do you you got a new client as an agency and you want to increase the social media engagement of a brand, let's say, or are you just looking for new blog articles, which I do sometimes as well, just I'm scrolling through certain hashtags or whatever, see what people are actually talking about. So I think you can find anything on social, and really comes back to what you're looking for. And I think what is really important here is that the mindset I talked earlier about, I think this is what we as marketers all need. Is like make a plan, make a hypothesis, an assumption, and then execute it. And then after executing, and really important, measure it, right? Then you see, okay, did it work? Did it not work that well? Which is completely normal. Then adjust something and then go over, make a new plan, execute it, measure it. I think this cycle kind of thing is really important, and a mindset you need to have also in like social media research.
Mm-hmm. So social media research is quite a broad term, and you can do different types of research within it. But as you say,
sure.
it's important to formulate your hypothesis and know what you're looking for. But now we wanted to find out which sort of data-driven research types actually work for our respondents. So we asked them the question, how effective is your use of each of these types of research? And what's interesting here is that the most effective types of research are used significantly less often, and those are customer interviews, customer satisfaction surveys, and content topic research. Jonathan, at Klipfolio, in your organization, what do you consider to be the most effective types of research?
Yeah, and it is interesting, the ones that you mentioned there at the bottom, because customer interviews are probably the one that I enjoy the most. So we always categorize them between qualitative and quantitative is how we first categorize them. And then with each one, the type of insights and actions you can get from that research differs, right? So a simple one would be an A/B test on a website. I can test things like title of the page or color of the button and quickly know whether or not a test is positive or negative. Surveys is another one we use very often to get baseline information. So you can say, how satisfied are you, like an NPS score, or have you used this feature, yes or no? And those are great. But the ones I really like the most, that actually give me the most interesting insights, but the hardest action, are the open-ended questions, but also an interview question. So I really love asking people why. Why do you use Klipfolio? To give you an answer. Well, why was that important for you? They give you an answer. Why do you? And you do it 5 times, and by the time you get to the 4th or 5th why, you're really uncovering the motivation, the reason why, and it never will surface in those first types of conversations. And so those are the most insightful. Like when you do persona research, that's a great example of how do you get deeper into the real reason why users are using your software.
Mm-hmm. That's a great key finding. Ask why 5 times to get all the answers you need.
A very classic ask questions framework, but it's amazing. Try it. Anyone who's never tried it, try it once, and you'll be just dumbfounded of how much more you learned from that person when you get to about the third one. It's like you interviewing me today. You know, why is that important to you, John? You go ask me again and again. You'll find out why. You'll get to a deeper answer versus the superficial answer when you usually get with most of this research.
And Eugene, what research types do you find most effective and why?
Yeah, first of all, I think Jonathan pretty much nailed it. Few things to add. I would focus on word effectiveness itself, because effectiveness by definition is something that depends on your expectations. And I think that would be seen in this survey, because areas that are ranked being very, very effective are also areas where you kind of get what you expect. Like when you do an interview, you know that you will, with a very high probability, get answers to your questions, and you're getting exactly this. While if you're running A/B tests, then you may expect something, very different. Sometimes you can run 5 tests just to find out there is no difference between those 2 pages, and you had some valid assumptions that there should be, but in reality there is no difference. So that can be frustrating, can make some people think that those areas are not, those types of research are not effective. So I think that would be kind of seen here. So the most effective ones where you get what you expect, and they're also not necessarily very scalable, like interviews, and less effective things that require proper setup. So it might be not necessarily in line with your expectations, but they are more scalable. And crazy outliers here are influencer research, because it's A, not very scalable, and B, people find it not very effective. So that's kind of no combination. But other observations, I would expect similar types of answers.
So yeah, it really depends in terms of what your expectations are. Yeah. And Julian, Quintly, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, what I find really effective is because there's, as I said, I'm working in the marketing here at Quintly, and there's always a lot of back and forth between marketing and sales, right? So and at some point, I wanted to find out what the leads, the people we bring in, who they are, right? So I just joined the sales team once or twice or 3 times now. And we'll definitely do that on a, let's say I wanted to do it on a weekly basis, but I didn't have time for that. So perhaps on a monthly basis, try to actually listen and talk to the people we are getting in with ads, we're actively paying money for, and content marketing, such as studies, are what we do. I think this is a really cool technique. I found it really cool for me or for us. To have a different or a common ground with sales and talk with them about the leads or the people we target. And then also I really like, for PR purposes, I really like to use Mention to just identify who's talking about competitors, for example, in our industry. And if a journalist talks about a competitor, I would say he's also interested in Quintly, so why not reach out to him? That's what I really like as well.
Yeah, I can relate to that. At Mynewsdesk, we also talk a lot to sales at the marketing department to figure out, are the leads that we're passing to sales, are they qualified? If not, why not? And also to get some insights on the kind of conversations they're having. What kind of objections do they get? So yeah, it's really important to have those conversations and get that feedback from sales.
Yeah, and now we asked why 3 times in a row, and then we get the proper answers.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to working agile, we also wanted to understand, do our respondents have a documented strategy in place, and does their documented strategy include measurable goals? What was surprising is that of those that have a documented strategy, close to 30% said that their strategy did not include measurable goals, which is probably the most important part of a strategy. Jonathan, at Klipfolio, do you think it's important to have a strategy and that it's documented and that you have measurable goals in it? And how often do you think one should work in sort of creating and updating their strategy on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, no, I used to have a boss that used to say hope is not a strategy. And so if you don't have objectives and measurable goals, then all you have is a hope. I'm also not a fan of very detailed, the traditional classical marketing plans anymore. We're an agile marketing team here. So we start off with every quarter and every year with objectives around growth and targets and trials and MQLs. And then you work backwards saying, what do I have to do with activities? And what activities drive metrics? Those metrics will then drive the objectives. And so without having something to measure yourself against, then how do you measure your performance? How do you cascade goals down to your team? How do you align your team? So I'm quite puzzled that most of these don't have goals. I'd rather have you have goals and no strategy than having a strategy and no goals. And so that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. And Eugene and Julian, do you guys have a strategy in place? How much importance do you put on writing down a strategy?
You want to go ahead, Eugene, or shall I go ahead? I go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of have a strategy in place. It's not a strategy, perhaps as traditional or like a traditional marketing plan, as Jonathan said, for example. Definitely, we have. I really like it to bring it down from a strategy, which is like not really tangible for the individual person. So really like to bring it down to objective or tactic or however you want to call it. I think that's really important. That the person X, Y, and Z working in marketing or even sales, you can relate to that too, or can transfer that to every different department, has something tangible and also measurable, right? If the strategy is reach like 10,000 MQLs in whatever, it's not really the strategy, right? So we need to work towards how do we want to actually get to this point, or how do we want to, as Quintly, empower businesses to be better in social media, or make better social media decisions. So I think we always need to break it down to small pieces, which then you can also give a number to or a KPI.
Okay, yeah. So it's really important to break it down into small pieces and have those measurable goals more so than the actual strategy. Very true. Okay, well let's move on. So we asked respondents about what are the mission critical metrics that they use, and now we're going to look at KPIs in various areas in different categories. So we asked them, okay, in terms of general KPIs and metrics, what do you use to measure performance? And not surprisingly, we see sort of brand awareness takes the top spot there. But it's interesting to see that share of voice and net promoter score aren't, highly adopted. Jonathan at Klipfolio, do you want? Why is that the case? Why do you think net promoter score and share of voice aren't measured more?
Oh, let's talk about NPS, because OpenView just published a report a week or two ago around the fact that there is the R coefficient between your NPS score and your logo churn is actually extremely small. So there's actually very little to say that when your NPS score goes up, your churn actually will go down. And so NPS is a good example of, the term they say vanity metrics. It's not quite a vanity metric. It has what I call a pulse metric. It allows you to keep a pulse on how happy your customers are, but it's also not very actionable. So my favorite example is if your NPS score changes from 8.2 to 8.3 or 8.4, can you really derive much from that change? And the answer is probably not. There's no way to easily take an action on that. So this is a great example when you're data driven, when you measure things, there's certain things you measure that are extremely actionable, and there's other things that are more like your your indicators of just kind of giving you a sense of your health, but not really totally actionable. Unless something like you do a major update and your NPS score drops drastically, then you might know then, okay, you've done something wrong. But when things are going smoothly and when you're in Agile and you're making, minor updates to your product all the time, it's a hard way to measure anything to do with those types of scores. So I can see why some people are saying these ones are their priority because they can action them. Brand awareness. If I have a negative review, I can action it, right? And so people are going to always tend to want to measure the ones that have a quicker response that they can take and do, and perhaps even change, right? I can change a negative review by talking to the person, hopefully, and have them come back and understand. But I can't change things like NPS, which is more generic.
All right. But it does sort of act as a sort of a health barometer of some sort.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. It's kind of like you have, your headlights and your taillights. Your taillights tell you what's happened in the past. So an NPS is a good kind of taillight, but it is not a good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. Just because they're happy now does not mean they're going to be a happy customer next month.
Very true. Now, regarding web-related metrics, it was interesting to see that unique backlinks and domain authority are quite, widely used or seen as being important. Eugene, at SEMRush, in your opinion, what do you think are the most important sort of web-related metrics to measure?
So this is like almost physically painful to see. Because it's just one of those showcases that people don't understand how internet works, right? And probably we can slice it by types of responders. So maybe for manager of the large corporation, maybe it's fine to not even know what is backlink. I'm okay with it. But if you're a PR professional and you think that backlinks are not important, that's a very bad attitude. When we work with PR professionals, and we do this all the time, we tell them, when you have a guest post somewhere or some Forbes, let's say Forbes writes about your company, very few people actually going to read this because Forbes have hundreds of new pieces of content. It depends where your content is located. So your actual reach is going to be not very big unless you hit a home run. But if you can get a backlink, if it's a do follow backlink from really good domain, that's the value. Then you can go to your page where this backlink lands and optimize this page for a context. And that's how to communicate in a measurable way additional value that your PR efforts provide. And we've seen some people being very successful with it in doing great content, sitting it across the web, getting high quality backlinks, and then ranking high for those topics. We've seen people just missing this miserably. But I mean, I think this is very, very underrated part of digital equation.
But with conversation I had with Jonathan a while back, you were actually mentioning that PR agencies and PR people are becoming more aware that they need to work much more with SEO and getting backlinks. That's right. Can you comment a little bit on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. The clients that we're seeing in the PR space definitely are evolving and becoming more of a full digital media house. So if you think about it now, if you have a post like Eugene is talking about, not only do you have to worry about the quality score, how many people are linking to it, you're going to also want to might do a social boost, that's a paid boost. You're going to want to have maybe an influencer reach out and share it with others. So it's no longer just the traditional sense of the job. The job has become data driven. So when you're talking with clients, you can't just say number of pages or web pages created or content written. Everybody wants to know what was the success of it and how are we going to measure the success of it and how can we watch success over time, because time is also another big one, especially with SEO. Things take a while to get truly indexed and truly get going. It's not you launch the page and you hope that in the next couple of days Google loves it and starts to give everybody access to it. A good page takes months to build. And so it's not the old way of doing it. It's a very complicated but very measurable way of driving success.
And then next we asked them about their PR-related KPIs and metrics. And I found this interesting. I've worked in PR myself, and it's fascinating to see that mentions in online media, social media, and print and traditional media are high up there, as well as mentions from influencers and bloggers. But that sentiment analysis is so low that people aren't really sort of evaluating whether the mentions are positive or negative. So it kind of seems that it's done all in vain. If you're getting media coverage, that's great, but you really need to assess whether that media coverage is beneficial and sort of changing the reputation and image of your brand. Now, regarding audience-related KPIs and metrics, I'd like to, ask Julian at Quintly. What are the metrics what metrics do you think are the most important, and is there a metric there that's missing?
I'd say right at the bat, I would say we talk quite a lot with conversion rates. It might be the case because my colleague sitting beside me, he's like working a lot with paid, and just across the room, there's the designer sitting. So we're having a lot of discussions about the data guy or the paid guy is asking, can I use a different screen, a bit more flashy screen, and conversion rate might increase? And the designer says, no, don't do it. But yeah, so this is a lot of back and forth inside the company, I guess, about conversion rates. I think it's really, really important to discuss about it because otherwise traffic is wasted, right? And if we see we do that in paid, we actively waste money. So it's really important to discuss about conversion rates and have this growth hacking mentality, as I said, to measure it in the cycle, to adjust it if necessary, and then create a new page, a new call to action button, or a new approach, how you get people in the funnel, for example, or however you want to call it. The second rate, I would say, what I'm pushing towards is a bit click rates in emails. If it's a one-to-one email or a one-to-many email, I think that's important. It gives a lot of feedback on how the email is written and how the email is and the content of the email. So I think that's an important one as well.
Mm. But when it comes to email, because I found this interesting from the conversation we had yesterday, you actually said that your emails are very simple. You've taken away all sort of HTML, design in the emails. It's just simple text, and they also you don't have any sort of salesy emails. Is that correct?
We try not to. At some point they become salesy for sure, or a bit more salesy. But I think we really try to be helpful with the content. We always ask when we sit together, setting up new emails and workflows, which are automated but sent from my personal email. Let's say people can reply to it, and that's pretty cool actually, because I got a lot of really interesting discussions with now clients or former prospects. I think it's really important that what we say is, do we really want to get this email in our inbox? And if we say, and one of us says, are not really because it's whatsoever boring or repetitive or too salesy or whatever, I think we just get rid of the email. So I think email marketing can work. It really has to be helpful. So if I consider it helpful, perhaps it is also for a few other people. And it really depends on the market, I guess. And we saw in Brazil, it's still working a lot better than Germany. If you send a mass email to Germany, there are a few Germans complaining about GDPR, and in Brazil, people are more happy about it because they see, oh, that's really helpful. Thank you very much, Julian. So that's also quite a big difference culturally, I would say.
That's my experience of Germany as well. They're very sensitive about their inbox.
They're very sensitive.
So if they receive an unsolicited email, then they complain about spam.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's interesting you say that.
Yeah.
But do you still find email as an effective channel?
Yes, that's it. I would say if you really pay attention to what you say, what you send out, how you send it out. For example, as you said, we don't have any call to action buttons anymore in emails. We just put it in the email text. For me, first of all, I have the impression it looks less spammy, And yeah, we really set up email series as well, where it's like not the call to action in the first 3 emails to book a demo, let's say. At some point we perhaps do, but the first 3 emails build a bit of trust with the prospect and said, okay, Julian's not just here to sell, but he actually is helpful, or trying to be helpful at least. Yeah.
Okay, good. Always think about the value that you provide. All right, so let's zoom out and think about the big picture issues. So for organizations competing in fast-changing industries, data-driven decision-making is not just a tactic, it really needs to be all-encompassing. So we asked people whether they felt their company had the right sort of culture, technology, and skills to support data-driven decision-making. And if you consider those that are neutral, you would say the majority of people don't feel their company supports them in these areas. What's more, we didn't only want to find out, if organizations are data driven, we also wanted to find out the level of data literacy among people. So we shared the following definition of data literacy with survey takers. Data literacy is the ability to extract meaning and insights from data. A person who is data literate is comfortable interpreting data graphics, analyzing and critiquing data presentations, and recognizing when data is being used to mislead. So when we ask the respondents to assess their level of data literacy, we see that 18% consider themselves as having a high data literacy, but more reassuringly, we see close to 60% see themselves as having a moderate level of data literacy. Jonathan at Klipfolio, do you think data literacy is important, and why?
Definitely data literacy is important. It is now becoming part of your day-to-day job. But it doesn't surprise me that the results have people low. Like, we're in the space, and I think if you went around asking people in our office where they think they are on that scale, most of us would put us at moderate, because there's no end to learning about data literacy. There's no end to learning how to get better at this. The technology is improving. We're getting more insights with AI and things like that, but there's no end to the learning curve. For example, a couple of years ago, we created a new metric called True Trials for us internally. And it's a measurement where we look at people who go in trial, and if they come back a second time within a 7-day period, so they talk about those email nurtures and other ways to bring them back, we then know with a very high degree of certainty what's the likelihood that they're going to close in the next 14 days. And this is the type of stuff that we just used our data to find insights and patterns to say there's a pattern here around how people go into trial. And so there's no end to the creation of ideas and metrics and things you want to track and how you want to go. So I think for most of us, I think, who are in the space, we're very humble about how there's no end. There's always somebody who's going to teach you something that you did not know, the week before, the month before. There's just no end to understanding and covering things. If I think of SEMRush, for example, they're adding new things to their software, I think almost every 2 weeks, that I have to go and learn because they're giving me new insights. And I have to understand, what are those insights going to give me? Why do I want them? How do I apply them? Right? So I know Eugene does this all the time. So as a user, we're like, okay, how do I action this? Right? It's great I got more data, but what do I do with that data? And so just think about data is never going to end. A new insight's never going to end. So then the question is, what action do I apply with that new insight?
Mm-hmm. And do you use AI to be able to identify these patterns and trends?
We have some tools that do use AI. We have a whole bunch of tools that do alerts, and we have a whole bunch of things that do things that track when something's out of whack. So I mentioned just before we jumped on the call this morning, we had an alert go off this morning saying that our trials tanked by 56%, and we do a couple hundred a day, and that's a big problem. But it turned out it was not a problem. Google Analytics was just not syncing up their data. They were just falling behind. So when we go double check our other data sources, everything was fine. And so this whole thing about the single source of truth, you definitely want that, but you also understand that systems are very complicated. Migration of data and all kinds of stuff usually breaks. And so you tend to need more than one place to make sure the data syncs and the data is actually legit. And so it's even that whole idea about where do I go is a huge challenge for organizations. Do I trust my CRM data? Do I trust my payment gateway? Do I trust my marketing automation tool? Like, which one do I trust? And it's just not as simple. It's not a simple solution for sure.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, do these results surprise you? What's your perspective on data literacy?
So I'm actually very happy to see those results, because as Jonathan said, people just should be humble about their ability to understand the data. And if we go back to the way you defined the data literacy, I think nobody has problems, understanding graphs. There are very few things you can do wrong there. Most of people who finished high school can do this, right? But then there is a piece where you have to identify data that was designed intentionally to mislead you, and that's very hard. But that for those things, you actually probably want to have someone in your company who's extremely data literate and know all the pieces of data and how they're coming together, and that's probably the only way to identify those things, because if there is any information asymmetry between person who creating this data and showing it and other people, their ability to call out issues is very, very limited, especially if they're seeing this data first time. They have very significant disadvantage. So from this point of view, it's just very, very hard to be data literate.
Mm-hmm.
Like 100% data literate.
Yeah, so you can use data to mislead, or you can use, withhold data to keep people in the dark. Yeah, very, very important points there. Julian, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just say it's essential to draw the right conclusions, right? If if I just think about myself, and if I'm looking at, let's say, the split of what I'm looking quite often into is the split of MQLs we get, if it's a healthy split or a not healthy split. For example, if we have German MQLs, the split of paid is a bit low compared to the previous months. Does it mean, okay, I talk to my colleague who's sitting beside me and ask him, what's the story about the German ads? Do we have a problem there? Wasn't the money spent, or what was actually working out or not working out? So I think then draw the conclusions based, okay, perhaps we need a new.
Sorry, I think we lost Julian there. Hello?
Do you guys hear me still?
Oh, now I do. We lost you there for a moment.
Okay, that's weird. So where did I cut off?
I'm not sure. Let's just move on. We'll go to the next slide. All right. So we wanted to find out from respondents how they describe their measurement and monitoring process, and we divided them up into 4 categories. One we call the active responder. So those are people that actively monitor performance metrics and change approach based on findings. Second is the passive tracker. So those are people that monitor performance but do not frequently change their approach based on what they find. Third is the inconsistent observer. So we monitor performance inconsistently and typically do not act on the information. And the last one is the stuck at start. So we rarely never monitor performance. So here it's presenting the data by job role, but across the board we see just 1 in 4 are in the category active responder. And that's something that at Mention and Mynewsdesk, something that we strongly believe in is the idea of being an active responder, because you're not only sort of monitoring performance, but you're also making adjustments based on what the data tells you, and certain outcomes trigger certain actions. So it's very much in line with the agile mindset of reacting to new information and iterating based on what you find. So gentlemen, in what category, would you place your organization in, and do you find it as important to be an active responder? So, Jonathan.
Well, absolutely. That's what Klipfolio does. So I'm glad your description, Chris, is exactly why we exist, right? And so if you walk around the Klipfolio office, we have a couple dozen TVs actively monitoring certain metrics that we want to track in either real time or daily. Then we also have, I get a daily report or a daily snapshot of a couple key metrics that I monitor for my team. And then I also do a monthly, and then I do a quarterly board summary. And so The best way that you described mentioning it is when you're in the active category, that means that you're able to collect the data in near real time or in the timelines that you need to make a response, right? So like Julian's example of an ad campaign, you have two ways you could do it. You could wait till the end of the ad campaign to see how it performs, or you could be tracking it in real time to say, is it already trending to be off course? And can I correct it before I get to the end of it? And so it really comes down to, there's certain businesses that absolutely need to be more active. There's also certain teams that need to be more active. So my favorite example is customer support. They always want to make sure they're responding to tickets as quickly as possible and almost in near real time. And the other one is, we talked about yesterday, the classic MQL. How fast and quick is the marketing team handing that MQL over to sales, and how fast is sales responding to it, right? So for anybody who's in marketing or PR, we could get all these great leads, but if they're not being followed up in a timely manner, then our efforts, are being wasted. And so yeah, you can definitely see active responder is the way I think everyone needs to get to and aspire to, but you won't get there for every metric, and you won't get there for every team. So just take your steps and do it team by team or metric by metric.
Yeah, it's a journey, right?
It's the journey, yeah. It takes we've been doing this for 10 years, and we just keep adding and removing and adding, removing, and it takes time. It does not happen overnight, that's for sure.
Eugene at SEMRush, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always very, very hesitant to rank our company in the highest category because my colleagues might be listening. So if I say we already doing great, they may say, okay, thank you, Eugene. We go home, nothing to improve. Thank you so much. Where is my bonus, by the way? So I'm a little bit hesitant to put us there, and also there are like fundamental limitations, I think, on what where you can and cannot be active responders. So if we talk about basic metrics, yeah, sure, we do all the daily reporting, weekly reporting, monthly, quarterly, all different metrics, because some metrics take more time to track, some metrics can be monitored on a daily basis. Thing that I'm extremely proud of is our churn prediction model. So, and it works on a daily basis. So every day I know how much exactly users will churn. And if there is very big deviation, then it takes me like one day to figure out what went wrong. And usually there is nothing wrong. As Jonathan said, sometimes you just have data glitches, something didn't sync up. But I see this very fast. But then there are questions like, you release a new feature and nobody uses new feature. And how are you going to react? How do you going to respond? You have hypothesis and you go around and you test them. Even things like interviews. If nobody is using this new feature, you cannot even have an interview and ask why you are not using it, because they have no idea you have this feature. So yeah, I mean, we try as much as we can, but sometimes it's hard for specific types of signals to be an active responder.
Understand. So yeah, I guess it's also sort of a cultural thing, and it also based on your expectations in terms of how you see your efforts, right? But yeah, I think you're too hard on yourself, Eugene. I think you could put yourself in the active responder category, to be honest. Julian at Quintly, are you there now? Are you connected?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Good. We hear you loud and clear.
That's very good. Yeah, I would say we became perhaps a more active responder since we have a BI dashboard in our marketing team, our marketing department room, sitting or hanging. I think that was a good step in the right direction. Pretty good example what Jonathan said before as well. We bring and we work quite hard and do our best to bring the MQLs in, right? And then we have the number of MQLs which is there and then have a forecasting model. If we continue to grow like this, we get like amount X of MQLs, and then we see, okay, that's almost the goal, so that's good, or not that good so far. And then we also see how many MQLs have been interacted with already. So how many people actually from sales touched the MQL, and this is also something why we now set a contract up, which is a bit fun, formal thing, and just say, okay, the two guys from marketing and sales just go there and sign something on a paper, and then say, okay, so we say we're accountable for number X of MQLs every month, so you are accountable for calling them in 24 hours. I think this is somewhat responding to data on a more daily basis. Or if we see, okay, there's a drop in MQLs in Brazil right now, shall we do a more short-term, short-sighted campaign to bring the number perhaps a bit artificially up, but to reach our goals in the end?
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify for our listeners, because we have a lot of people in the PR comms industry, MQL is a marketing qualified lead,
exactly.
in case you're wondering. Right. Then we also asked people, what other functions and roles do they collaborate with to collect, measure, and analyze data? And we kind of assumed that the role of the data scientist would be more important and be higher there, and we would expect marketeers and communication professionals to collaborate more with data scientists. We have one data scientist in house at Mynewsdesk, and I know that Mention also has a data scientist. Jonathan and Klipfolio, why do you think few organizations make use of a data scientist?
Well, I think a challenge, depending on who responded to the survey and their demographics, is that you don't usually hire a data scientist or someone responsible for data until you're a little bit larger. So the pattern we see with our customers is when you get to about the 30, 40, 50 employee mark, you start to actually have someone who's dedicated in that role. And they could be your data warehouse person, they could be a data scientist, they could have different types of roles. They could be just your data sync person helping out there. And then that role starts to create the infrastructure that allows you to create the true data scientist role. And so I think it's a size thing. Before that, everybody's trying to do a little bit to add to it. So when you're smaller, everyone's playing the role, so the role does not really exist. But definitely the ones that we see the most often is we spend a lot of time with sales. So like Julian said, there's a lot of marketing and sales cross collaboration, and that's usually around quality, quantity, messaging, feedback. And then with the finance team, we do a lot of stuff like Eugene talked about, churn predictions, understanding cohort analysis and things like that. And so with each team, you kind of have a different lens on the overlap of what you want to see of how the business runs. And so it's actually interesting that, if you looked at how marketing interacts with every different team, it's very interesting. Like a product team, we're talking about feature launches, we're talking about customer interviews, we're talking about personas and things like that. So it's a fun role actually being marketing, because you got to have a very different lens with every team. And with every team, you're looking at a different angle of business. And that way in marketing, you actually have a very different lens of the entire business, because you interact with everybody in such a diverse way. And so, yeah, I always find the marketing teams are great to go in and dig in and understand how the business is performing, because they've interacted with so many different data points.
Yeah, you kind of have to be the spider in the web, connecting
Correct.
with everything
Absolutely.
and everyone. Now, one of the most compelling findings from the research involves data silos. So 44% of respondents report their company's data is trapped in silos and inaccessible to those that need it. And again, I'm going to address this question to Jonathan and Klipfolio, because I think that your product helps to solve this problem and issue. What is your view on this? Like, how do organizations overcome this challenge?
Absolutely. So you talk about data literacy, data silos. The other thing you talk about is data libraries. And that means what are we measuring in the organization that we can share across the organization, and where does that data for that metric has a single source of truth? And so the examples I always love to give is you can take revenue. Marketing has a revenue number based on their systems. Finance have a revenue number based on their credit card systems, and the sales team has a revenue number based on their CRM systems, right? And I'd say 9 out of 10 times when you try to sync those, they will not sync, like Eugene was talking about with one of his challenges, right? And so we've actually created what we call a metric first platform. It's metric monitoring. And the idea is that a metric is your single source of truth, and that metric can now be shared across the organization, so that the top to the bottom have access and understanding of who's measuring what, why they're measuring it, but most importantly, how's it defined? You know, how do you define what a partner is, or an ISV, or a channel, or how do we calculate churn? Are we calculating it based on logo churn, percentages, right? How do we calculate reductions? All these things have a lot of questions for employees, and if you don't make it easy for them to understand, then they can make the wrong assumptions also off that data. There's nothing worse than sharing something and having someone act on it in the wrong manner because it's not well defined.
Mm-hmm. So it's very important to sort of define the key metrics and have a common understanding of what those key metrics mean.
Correct. So like Eugene mentioned backlinks. So if you're someone new, you've never done that, what is a backlink? Why would I care about it? What is a good backlink? What is a bad backlink? So, you know, trying to share that knowledge gets very quickly. Well, that's just one metric that Eugene mentioned. I'm sure he can mention 12 more that have a different definition. And as you go across organizations, what's interesting is definitions for some metrics stay the same, but for some metrics they don't. And so you have to make sure then it's, you know, when you leave one organization and join another one, you're not bringing the wrong type of insights and manner to the business.
All right, now we've reached the end of today's webinar, and we're going to talk about the steps you need to take to become more data-driven. In our ebook, The Data-Driven Mindset, we have listed 6 steps, and if you want to get an explanation of each one, I encourage you to download a copy of the report. Otherwise, we'll share that with you in a follow-up email. But right now, I want to get our guest speakers to talk about their journey, how they went through about becoming more data-driven. Eugene, would you like to share your story?
So in our companies, all started with people. And because of this, you're probably not going to get this right until your company of certain size where you can afford people whose pretty much sole responsibility will be to make sure that other people are getting accurate, consistent, actionable data. I think for us, it started roughly at 60 people. And I think we still maintain this kind of ratio between headcount and number of data scientists. It's roughly 1 to 60. We also have data scientists in other parts of organization. They're not necessarily working on business intelligence metrics, but they're helping other teams, you know, on the product metrics, in marketing metrics, and so on. So effective number of data kind of driven people is much bigger, but the best way to start is when you can afford dedicated data scientists whose job will be just to ensure that data is consistent, accessible, accurate, actionable. Just hire this person and you know, make sure that he or she can be successful.
Okay. Julian at Quintly.
I think I thought about it a bit, and I thought it came with the new setup of tools, kind of. First of all, we started off with a WordPress blog, and then it became, we used MailChimp for sending emails, and then we said, okay, that's not enough anymore, so we switched to HubSpot. And then with HubSpot, there came a lot of possibilities to do analytics, not only to do Google Analytics, but also do more comprehensive analytics of everything we do. Basically, setting our landing pages was easier, so we became more data driven on the landing pages. So that was a step-by-step process. Like last week, I had a discussion with my colleague, and there was the only metric 2 years ago, basically, is basically we just collected or counted the number of leads we gathered by people who downloaded studies. That was our only metric 2 or 3 years ago, let's say. And now, and then through all the tools we use, MailChimp, HubSpot, and then soon we saw the need of visualizing our data in a BI tool in our in our department. As I said before, I think then that was the whole process behind it, and that was really enabled us also to find channels where we can invest money in, because we see the data showed us, okay, that actually worked out, that was helpful. So that was, for us as a bootstrap company, really important to say, okay, we really believe in, let's say, paid Google is a field that is working well, performing well based on data, let's say, as an example, so we hire a person for that. or content is really working for us, so we hire a new content person. So I think it came with first the tool setup, or went hand in hand with the tool setup, and then secondly also with the people, or after that we hired the people, and then as Eugene said.
Perfect. And Jonathan at Klipfolio,
Sure,
what's been your journey?
Yeah, I'll share a simple kind of 3-step process. So the first step is start simple, start with a couple metrics, and focus only on you or your team, right? So let's just start getting the nucleus done. Then the next step would be, I suggest everyone read a book about OKRs. That is a process about objectives and key results that came out of Intel and Google's way of sharing objectives across the organization. This kind of explains what is the data-driven mindset and why, and it's a great book. And then after that, when you get a little bit more advanced, then I get everyone obsessed around the one metric, which is conversions. I want everyone to be obsessed around conversions of everything they do. So website into leads, leads into marketing qualified leads, marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads, and just be absolutely obsessed around conversion rates from top to bottom. Especially for marketing people, we find we tend to drop off tracking further down after we handed off the lead, and you really don't know how well you're doing at the bottom of the funnel. And then the bottom of the funnel goes back up to the top of the funnel. So conversion rates is also the one that once you start to get more mature and you're wondering, what should I do next in my journey? Get obsessive on the customer journey and every step for conversion. So conversion rates of paid versus organic on your website. Types of different integrations you're using. Anything you can do to keep looking at your entire funnel, but through the one metric around conversion rates is probably the most insightful way to understand how your business is run.
Excellent. So to sum it up, it's all about having the right people, the right tools and technology, and then lastly, starting simple, building from that, and being obsessive about conversions.
That's a great summary, Chris.
Thank you. All right. Well, we've reached the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, Jonathan from Klipfolio, Julian from Quintly, and Eugene from SEMRush for taking time in your day to share your experience and knowledge with our audience and listeners today. That's all from me. If you want to get more detail in the Mynewsdesk and Mention survey that we just conducted last year in October, November, please download the copy of the Data-Driven Mindset at bit.ly/data-driven19. Thank you for joining us. That's all from me.
Thanks for having us. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.